in development. Okay. Morning, everyone. It's been a while, and I would like to welcome you back to Conversations with Wandi. I've been a person missing in action, but I'm super thankful for Wandera for holding on to this for as long as she can. I'm glad to be back and to be joining you today. Was just wanting to reintroduce myself just in case there was someone who's joining us for the first time. My name is Josephine Wawira, and I'm a co-director, a co-founder at Conversations with Wandi. And I would just want to ask that we give 10 minutes maybe for those who are still joining us to join, and at 9:10 we officially start the conversation. Meanwhile, feel free to introduce yourself on the chats. Tell us who you are, where you're joining us from, and which organization you're representing if you would wish to share that. And then from there, we start a conversation where we are discussing performance improvement. And I hope that today you enjoy the conversation as much as we always do. Feel free to ask questions on the chat and on the Q&A. We shall find time to respond to all of them. Karibuni sana, and looking forward to having a blast today. Amazing. So welcome once again, everybody. We are now going to start as we had indicated, and those who are joining us after this will find us on the way, and we shall continue the conversation. So today, once again, we are managing underperformance with a focus on the performance improvement plan. And what do we want to achieve by the end of this conversation? We want to know, one, what is the performance improvement plan, popularly known as PIP, and when do we consider when to use it, and what checklist do we need to have? And how do we also break the news that we are having a performance improvement conversation with the employees for those who are employers, and what are some of the benefits? And then after that, what happens if the outcome of this conversation is negative, and what are some of the decided cases of interest that we should consider, as is case of Conversations with Wandi, where we are always referring to cases that have been decided in a particular topic. And thereafter, we shall have a Q&A time where you get to ask us questions and we shall respond. But remember, like I indicated before, you can feel free to also shoot that question on the chat if it's burning, or on the Q&A, and we shall consider whether to answer it on the way or to wait until the Q&A session. Meanwhile, allow me to appreciate you this morning for making time, and without further ado, to welcome Wandera Kweyu to take us through the conversation. Karibu sana, Wandera.
Asante, and thank you very much, everybody, for joining this conversation. For anybody that is joining for the first time, my name is Wandera Kweyu, but everybody calls me Wandi. I'm very grateful to have you here, and to our repeat attendees, we are very grateful for your time that you give us each Friday of the last month. We thank you for joining. And again, we want to remind you can follow us on our socials at LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram at Conversations with Wandi. Without further ado, allow me to just go back and go straight into the meat of the conversation today, and let's start understanding what a performance improvement plan is. The performance improvement plan is a term that is used very loosely in quite a number of sectors, where you find somebody tells somebody verbally, I don't like what you're doing here, I expect you to improve starting tomorrow. Somebody would term that as a performance improvement plan. Others will just randomly come one morning and tell you, okay, this is how performance should be, and you have been doing well. All of these aspects, they form part of a performance improvement plan, but a performance improvement plan is an actual well thought out program that is centered on the objectives of a role, centered on the job description that the role holder has, and it is centered on various other factors that then bring it into play. So for us, a performance improvement plan is a structured process that helps an employee to improve their job performance. So when you're doing a PIP from wherever you are, you have to ask yourself, is my process structured? Now, it is very important to notice that a PIP is initiated when the performance of an employee is consistently low. The word is consistently below expectation. You also have to have shown that other types of interventions that are available, like performance coaching, proper feedback, training, other types of maybe job shadowing, job rotations, are not working. Then you can start introducing the formal structured way to do a PIP. So ladies and gentlemen, please remember that you don't just wake up one morning and tell everybody, now you're on a PIP. No, there has to be other initiatives that you have put in place for you to make sure that the employee you've tried as much as possible to improve their performance. Because remember, underperformance is not a station, it's a continuous action. It starts from a place and then it builds and it gets to the place where you say, okay, at this particular spot, nothing else is working. So ladies and gentlemen, remember that, one, you must try other forms of intervention to improve performance before introducing a PIP. Other forms could be performance coaching. Sometimes it could be simply restating the expectations of the role. It could be training. It could be maybe job shadowing, job rotation. It could be even just sitting down and reclarifying the job description and explaining how they impact the whole business through their performance. When all these things have failed, that is when you bring in the performance improvement plan. Now, the thing about the PIP, the way it has been understood, especially in our side of the continent, PIP is viewed as a disciplinary action. Ladies and gentlemen, it's very important for us, and we will see this as we are continuing, that PIP should not be viewed as a disciplinary action. In actual sense, PIP is a positive step towards performance improvement. And ladies and gentlemen, you'll come to realize that this is a very, very important point, because there is a lot of legal precedents that surround this particular understanding that makes an employer become quite liable if they use a PIP as a disciplinary tool. It is also important when you're coming up with your PIP to appreciate, one, it must have specific performance issues. You must say, hey, you're having challenges with your performance, and this is what they are. A PIP is not allowed to be vague. And I want to repeat that one more time so that we can be quite aware of what I mean by a PIP must have the issues identified. So don't just say in general, your behavior is not within the structure. What does in general mean? How is the behavior being exemplified? How is it giving negative connotations to the business? And how is that behavior related to the job description that this person has? So please remember again, the issues of performance need to be very specific. The second thing is, once you have your specific performance issues, set goals. The goals have to be measurable. Again, remember the SMART acronym. They have to be smart. They have to be specific. They have to be time-bound. They have to be specific, measurable, actionable, and time-bound. So you need to be able to have a very clear goal that is put through to the specific performance issues that you have up. Then there should be actions that are outlined for this individual, and this employee needs to take this action to improve. Like, for instance, when you say your behavior of not socializing with customers as a customer service officer is putting off our clients, especially when you're giving feedback through phone calls. They tend to prefer if you are quite listening well, if you are able to understand and empathize with them, and you're able to give reassurance for them, then these are specific areas that this person can focus on. And then you tell them, now the next time you're picking up a phone call to assist a customer, start with a greeting. Listen to them without interrupting. Then give them the specific options that they have to be able to resolve their challenge. Ask them at the end of the conversation if there is any other thing you could help them with, and then thank them for calling your organization and hope that they will continue to enjoy the services that you're offering. These are actionable steps that employee can take. And then remember, the last one is that performance improvement plan should have a specific time for the improvement. Now, there is no precedence in law that actually says it should be 1 month, it should be 2 months. But what you notice in common practice is that performance improvement plans range in the values of 30, 60, 90 to 365 days. Depending on the complexities of what it is you're doing, you could use that complexity to appreciate whether you want to have this performance improvement plan for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, and or a longer period. So remember, there is no specific legal precedence that puts you there. The other thing about the performance improvement plan is that it can only come up after an appraisal or a performance evaluation. So please don't just wake up one morning and say, you know what, Wendy, tomorrow you're going on a PIP. No, it has to have come out from, this is what you are meant to do. This is what your job description is saying. This is what you have been able to do. And because we have been unable to help you through coaching, through training, etc., we are now going to put you on a performance improvement plan. So remember the structure and the context around the performance improvement plan before you actually start it. So I hope, ladies and gentlemen, that you've been able to understand the what of a performance improvement plan. Just if I could have the next slide. Now, when do you start thinking about, okay, the PIP is now what we need to put in place? Skills gap is one of the biggest reasons why a PIP come into place. And skills gap quite heavy when an employee is having them. And I try to encourage very many employers to have a definition of the skills that are needed in their job spaces. Other organizations that are very progressive in terms of their mapping of skills would have a competency framework for a particular position or for the management of the whole structure of the organization. So that when they say, as a cashier, you need to be able to have, if it's a technical competency, maybe they say your arithmetic skill needs to be good, so that when you're receiving and giving, when you're receiving payments and giving any types of change that comes with it, you are avoiding errors. So you find that there is this organization that have gone out of their way to develop a competency framework that redefines properly what that behavior that an employee needs to have in terms of their skill is, how they display it, how they should not display it, and there is grades that are put in place for you to know, if I am performing at this space in this competency, this is how I am being graded. If your organization is that progressive, then very good, and you can be able to use your competency framework to actually go back and identify skills gaps in different types of employees. If you don't have a competency framework, really utilize your job description, because you notice that most job descriptions have a laundry list of what needs to be done. And then after that, they would tell you this is the experience and the exposure that is needed. And then these are the skills that are needed in that space. Remember also at that particular point, there is a bit of vagueness. Like for instance, when I say communication skills, sometimes it can become difficult to actually pinpoint how that is a gap for me, but you shouldn't be worried, because once it is there, you can use this, the times for maybe setting the objectives, the times for doing appraisal, to explain exactly what that is to an employee. So skills gap are the most common spaces where you find PIPs start to come into place. Second is communication challenges. And communication challenges are normally some of the biggest issues that affect any workplace. If, for instance, you have created silos, or you yourself are the silo, and you're doing your work only to yourself in your dark corner, refusing to share information, and you notice maybe there is a duplication of effort, maybe a triple effort direction for a similar task, because this individual is not communicating. Or sometimes it could be communication challenges in when you're not attending, or when there is a problem that makes it difficult for you to attend to work. You can notice that there are some people who they miss work for 7 days, and then they call you on the 10th day and they say, my phone was lost. These kinds of things put people in a very strange position. And you notice that 9 out of 10, if it's not a skills gap, the thing that brings you to a PIP is communication challenges. And then, of course, we have the behavioral issues that can also sometimes cause people to consider a PIP. When you're using behavioral issues to start your PIP, you need to be very particular about what types of behaviors that somebody needs to exemplify in the workspace. Remember, behavioral issues should not be the person. Don't say, I dislike Wendy, so I don't like how she behaves. You need to say, this is how Wendy behaves, and this is how that behavior has a negative impact to the organization in general. So when you're going to go with behavioral issues as one of the areas that you consider to put a PIP in, remember to be very clear about what that behavior is and what the impact of that negative behavior is on the organization. Now, when it comes to matters productivity, again, many organizations, especially the ones that have really progressed in their practice of people and culture, are very clear on what productivity is for every employee. They know specifically that this is, for instance, this is the kind of revenue that they bring in every year. They know, for instance, this is the kind of internal excellence and business practices that they bring by individual. They would know in terms of growth for themselves, what it is they're supposed to do, in terms of the value they give to their shareholders, the value they give to their customers, both internal and external. These organizations would find it very easy for them to say your productivity is below par, because then they already have instances that are super clear on how and what the productivity levels need to be in any circumstance. So when that is not reached, the conversation is very easy when you want to take it towards the direction of the PIP. But do not worry if you do not have that expansive ways of looking at productivity. You can actually start at that point where you're doing your next appraisal. And it's very easy for you to be able to know what productivity is. Like, for instance, if I'm a call center agent, and what I'm measured on is, for instance, the number of calls that I actually picked, the number of calls that are dropped, the number of customers that call back after I have called them, and the number of customers that give me praise after I have, for instance, handled their issue. These are areas where you can say, for instance, your call drop rate should not be more than 20 calls in an hour. Now, if I am already having call drop rate of maybe 400, 500 in a week, it means that I am not meeting that productivity level that is required. So even if you don't have elaborate things that are set, you can start during the performance appraisals or at the point of giving somebody their job descriptions or their objectives for that particular period to delineate what productivity means for you. But also, again, this is one of the biggest areas that PIPs are considered during the areas of low productivity. The other one is poor attendance. Poor attendance can be quite harmful to any business. You find that there is those people sometimes who are very absent, for lack of better words. You find that in a week, this person is attending maybe twice or thrice to work, and there is always good reason and good excuse. There are no cars that were coming that direction. The matatus were on strike. My housekeeper was not there. My child was having a problem. I was having a minor headache. I needed to sleep. There's a myriad of excuses that make this person consistently probably attend work consistently twice in a 5 or a 6 day period. You find that this is one of the things that is very central to the delivery of their objectives and to carry out the functions within their job description. So when you notice this is happening, there is a tendency for quite a number of people to consider PIPs, especially, like I said, when all the other things that you're supposed to do were done, but then this persisted. So, ladies and gentlemen, as to where we are right now, we have understood what the PIP is and the things that would help us to consider whether or not to introduce the PIP. I see here that we have one question before I go into the checklist. And please, ladies and gentlemen, remember that you can always type your question in the question and answer section, or you can type your question in the chat box and we'll be able to get to you and answer your questions. Now, there is somebody here who has said, I had a situation where one of the staff on PIP resigned after 2 months into the PIP. Does this nullify the PIP process even during the month when the staff is serving notice? Do the review meetings continue? Should the report be prepared for the period the person was on PIP? Your answers to this question, all your questions, is yes. One of the things that you need to remember is that when an individual has, when an organization still has control of an individual, or in better words, when the contractual relationship between employer and employee still is valid, this person is still under the rules and regulation of that contract. So, for instance, if I have given you my notice on the 31st of March, and it expires on the 30th of April, from the 31st till the 30th of April, for all intent and purpose, you're still an employee for that organization. And any processes and procedures that you are subject to during your employment will continue. It only stops at that point where that person stops to be an employee. Now, there is quite a number of people who, once somebody issues a resignation, they consider the effect or the value of inputting time into that particular situation, knowing very well that you would not have any benefits from it. That is why you see quite a number of employers back off when somebody resigns, because you know that the eventuality is that this person is going to leave, there's a clock on it. So you go and figure out which is the best value use of my time. Where do I want to invest my time in? And you find that quite a number of employers prefer that they invest their time in people that are continuing to be their employees in the long haul, or maybe in a longer period of time rather than 15 days of notice or 7 days of notice or 1 month of notice. So again, remember, if you prefer to continue with the PIP during a person's notice period, it is allowed. If you decide to not during the notice period, it is also allowed, because that person is still working within your area. What is not allowed is for you to follow up somebody who has ceased to be an employee of the organization with any other matters with regarding to the PIP or other performance challenges. So you need to keep that in mind as we continue. Now, the second question that's here before we go into the checklist is, some of the issues like poor attendance are disciplinary issues. Do I still handle that under PIP or discipline? And then you're saying thanks. Now, what we had said earlier is a PIP is a last resort to trying to improve somebody's performance. Now, when you're going to dismiss somebody on matters of poor performance, you have to have shown as an employer the interventions and initiatives that you put in place to ensure that this person has an opportunity to understand their performance deficits and actually go ahead and improve their performance deficits. This is why you hear things like performance coaching is normally one of the areas you go with before you go into the PIP. You also hear things like reclarification of objectives and requirements before you go into the issues of PIPs. Sometimes you notice that there is also performance counseling, where somebody can be called in and be told, okay, your absence is becoming really, really high, and this is how it is affecting the organization. And as we move forward, we would prefer that you do X, Y, Z. Some of them would go a greater length and ask, is there something that the organization can be able to do for you so that you are not consistently not attending at work? And then if it doesn't work, you put them on a PIP and say, you know what, from here to here, we need to be able to see your attendance should be at 8, your leaving should be at 5. Every single time period, we want to watch this for the next 30 days. If this doesn't improve, we will have to have a different conversation. And if that doesn't improve, then you go into the process of disciplinary issues owing to poor performance occasioned by non-attendance. Please note that by when I'm talking about poor attendance, I am not talking about absconding duty. Those are two different issues, where I just disappear and don't come back again. That is absconding of duty, and you can pass that one very easily through the disciplinary process. But also, as we are talking, you come to realize that a PIP is not a disciplinary action, just as I have said in my first slide. A PIP is a performance improvement tool and should not be considered as a disciplinary action. And there is actually quite a number of legal precedents that would show you exactly that, where courts have ruled very specifically. In fact, courts have pronounced themselves very well that a PIP is not a disciplinary action. It cannot be considered as part of the disciplinary process, because the disciplinary process, as we'll come to talk about it slightly later, is a very organic process that is quite known, that is different from that of a PIP. I'll take the last question before we go back into our checklist. When an employer asks you for feedback regarding a staff who left while on PIP, do you mention it as part of feedback? I'm just trying to think here that you mean if a person is coming to check, to reference check for that particular employee. There is a thin line when you're giving reference about a person. One of the things that you need to understand is that recently, people have been found guilty of what we call employment defamation, where people have been defaming other people in the name of giving feedback for their performance and or giving a recommendation for them, where people have found that some of the statements that they have made in the name of I am giving the referral checks that have been asked have been found to actually be defamatory. What happens with a PIP is a PIP sometimes can be very subjective. If, for instance, I wasn't able to perform because from where I stand, the issue was that I lacked the tools and the materials to do my work. Or it could be that where I was, my line manager was completely unaware of what I was doing. Therefore, I could not be able to put my skills across. And that's why I got into the PIP. And when I noticed that I'm in the PIP, I decided to resign. You know, it could be a very thin line. If you tell the other employer that this person is a non-performer, so be very careful when you are listing somebody as a non-performer in an organization when giving a reference. Key is to read more about what employment defamation is so that you don't find yourself caught up in such a particular space. Just if we could go back to our slides, I'll pick the questions as we continue. Ladies and gentlemen, for the ones who have joined us as we are continuing, we have gone through what the PIP is, and we've been able to explain to you that it is a structured process of improving performance. We have been able to let you know that it needs to have a specific time. It can only be initiated after an appraisal, and it needs to be able to be initiated after other initiatives to improve performance have failed. Now, we've also gone through the situations where you can consider the PIP, where we have issues with skills gap, behavioral challenges, communication issues, poor attendance, among others. And now we are in this space where we are saying, what is that checklist that you need to be able to have in your PIP? There are 7 things that are always require people to use as a checklist when it comes to your PIP. And the reason I say it is required is when you look at many situations where the PIP went wrong, one of these 7 issues was missed. When you look at some of the situations that even caused discomfort to a person that was put in the PIP, you find that one of these things was missed. So allow me to just go through this process again and talk to you about the 7 issues that are quite pertinent in having a PIP. Now, when we say you need to identify the issue, what does this mean? I'll just give you some samples of what you can be able to do so that you continue to assess the issue in a different way. Because when you haven't identified it properly, to assess it, which is the next step, is going to be a bit difficult. So you can start by writing down specific examples of your team members' actions and behaviors that are occurring within the workspace. You know, gather any documents that can demonstrate. For instance, if I'm an accountant and I'm supposed to be balancing and closing out, let's say, one account, let's say it's a medical refund account, and my work is to make sure that every person that comes and gets refunded, we are able to reprocess that with the insurer gives us money, and us, we refund the individual. And my work is to make sure that once that individual has been refunded, the account is closed by having the correct entries made and issuing a receipt to this individual. If you find that since January to date, Wendy has actually not closed the account and there are quite a number of amounts that remain outstanding, maybe she issued 2 receipts and there are like 7 receipts that were not issued. So you start by writing down some of these things that are happening. Then write down why the behavior is an issue. It could be something that is affecting the organization internally, other employees, external candidates, among other things, including safety within the workspace. Write down the why, and also write down how the behavior needs to change. Like in the example that I have given, you can say, 1, I am supposed to, within 2 days of receiving a medical claim, go ahead and process it. Once it has been processed, I need to be able to, within 2 days of receiving the funds from the insurer, made the correct entries into our books. And within 4 days of making payment to the individual that is getting the reimbursement, to make the right and necessary entries into that book so that that ledger is closed. Now, this is what you can be able to write. It brings you then to your next space, because at this point, your issues are quite clear, and now you need to assess them. The reason you assess this issue, you need to put yourself in that space where you know you're going to meet an individual who is going to hear you, but they're not going to like that which you're saying. So you need to have a really good assessment that can help you work with your employee for them to understand where this issue is coming from. So before you meet with that person, think about how serious the issue is and how long it has lasted. This can help you. This can be the step one, can help this particular step become really easy. Then assess how wide the gap is between what is expected and what the person is doing. Like in the instance that I've said, if we want the account to be balanced by the end of each month, and it is now March, and I haven't balanced the January accounts, I can easily tell that there might be a situation where there could be a misstatement of financial records, which is a serious issue that can actually misstate completely the position of the organization in terms of its profits and losses. So when you are able to think about how long, you can easily say to this individual, we have a 3-month period that is unaccounted for in our ledgers. And also think about the possible causes of this issue so that you can be able to keep your mind open. Because once you're talking to an employee about these particular issues, you have to notice that that person is very vulnerable as they're coming to you. If you go with this is exactly what needs to be done and just push it and push it and push it, what you might notice is that you might fail to hear the employee. And when you fail to hear the employee, what could happen is that you could have a place where your mind is not open and you won't be able to even learn some of the issues that are maybe systemic issues that could help an employee within the space of performance improvement. Now, once you have your issue, once it is well assessed and well understood to you, meet with your employee. When you're doing the meeting, please discuss the issue with your team member as soon as possible. For instance, in the situation that I have given, if Wendy has not been closing our account since January, to tell me about it in April, I would like to wonder, how long has this issue persisted and why is it becoming an issue now? Ignoring telling somebody about their problems with performance likely makes it worse. Arrange to meet with your team member at a time and a place where you will not be interrupted. So when you're going to put somebody on a PIP, please put your phone on silent, give them a space where they can be able to talk, give them enough time. Don't set a period for PIP to be 30 minutes. Give them enough time because this is the full work of this employee to that organization. This is what they have spent 75% of their lives doing. You cannot dismiss them that easily. And especially because this is already a difficult conversation, ensure that the surrounding environment is that which helps you to be able to get the team member in a good space to hear you for purposes of progress. Let your team member know in advance what the discussion will be about. Don't tell somebody, meet me at 12:30, and then I come in at 12:30 and I'm like, okay, so Wendy, we have been having a challenge with your performance and starting tomorrow, we're going to put you on a PIP. That is not going to get the effect that you want. You need to have told the person that we are coming at 12 to discuss your performance and how we can put you on a plan that will help you to improve the performance. So don't ambush that person before the meeting. Now, clearly describe the issue. That is your step 1 and 2 can really help you because then you have your examples, how long it is affecting the business, etc. This is you describing it now to the employee. Invite the employee to respond. Always invite the employee to respond. And I know employees at this particular point would want to be defensive a little bit, and the employer would want to really stick to their guns on what it is they want to be done in this particular space. Finding a middle ground is really important because PIPs have actually been quite successful in a wide range of activities when they have been used correctly. So make sure that you're hearing this employee when they are responding to your issue. Now, explore the issue and the possible causes by asking open questions. Like, for instance, you can say, okay, Wendy, you haven't been balancing the accounts since January. would you be able to clarify for me why this is happening? And they would tell you, I'm very busy, I'm handling 12 other accounts, the work is just so much. And you'll be like, okay, granted, in these 12 accounts, what is stretching you the most? So that this person can talk to you, they can make you see, and they will see where you're coming from, so that both of you can understand the challenge that is there. And then think about your impression and your body language. Don't sit with somebody and as they're talking, you're rolling your eyes or you're tapping your hand on the desk because you're wondering, now this one, the way you are sitting defensively, you're not even looking at them. Or sometimes it could be you're so nervous that they can see it. So at this particular point, be watchful of the impression that you're giving that particular individual. Then make sure that you jointly devise a solution. And ladies and gentlemen, here I'm talking to the HR practitioners also. Performance improvement plan and recorded by the HR team. The performance improvement plan should not be constructed by the HR team. Again, I really hear me well. You are supposed to document and record and keep the record of the performance improvement plan, but you're not supposed to be the person that writes it. Why do I say this? It's because when you're not the supervisor of the person that is in place, you don't understand the work that is required to be done in that area. You're not the holder of the job description of that area or the holder of the impact of the performance in that area. You cannot, in actual fact, devise a PIP. So ensure that the PIP is jointly devised between the employee and their supervisor. If there needs to be mediation as the process is ongoing, you can actually come in as an HR practitioner and mediate. Now, once that solution is being devised, explore possible solutions, like I've said again, open questions, etc. Let the team members suggest some of the solutions, agree on a way to resolve the issue, offer support, and agree on a time for you and your employee to improve their performance and set the review. So you're like, okay, so we're going to do this in a period of 90 days. There'll be monthly reviews on this particular date to achieve this situation that we have agreed upon as ourselves. Now you go ahead then and you monitor performance. Make sure that like this meeting that I've said is going to be done monthly. Make sure that on that state, you are very particular about the actions that are supposed to be seen. You are on point about exactly what performance means, and it is recorded in the PIP plan. Make sure that you provide very clear feedback. Your support towards this person during this period should be very present, and it shouldn't be in any situation where you can infer that maybe that person is not available to their team member. When you're meeting with your team member, make sure you meet and review the performance on the agreed time. Don't tell me we're going to meet on the 2nd of April and we end up meeting on the 17th of May. No, put it on the agreed time. Because like I said, this is a structured process that is required, that is put in to improve somebody's performance. So when you keep changing things, you will lose the structure. If your team member's performance has improved, acknowledge that the issue has been resolved and discuss especially how to maintain improvement, to maintain the performance that has been seen. Quite a number of times, people put people on a PIP. When they improve, you just discharge them from the PIP and leave it like that. There's no processes of discussion on how to maintain the improvements. And then 3 months later, you're right back to where you are. Remember to discuss with the team member how they can continuously maintain their improvement and also continue to offer support and encouragement for that individual. If, for instance, that performance has not improved, you could extend the period and repeat the process, or consider progressing to the formal steps through your HR department. And the formal steps here, I could be insinuating that you can then now launch a show course for this person to explain why their poor performance, why they shouldn't take disciplinary action owing to their poor performance. If you're in a business where you don't have a human resource department, as business owners, I normally advise, seek advice from a HR advisor on what you can do next, especially when you start going into the process of separating with an employee. Now, the last thing is to keep records. Whatever is not documented cannot be proven. Make sure that each and everything that you put in this particular process is documented. Give a copy to the person who was in the process, have a copy for your files, and make sure that at every given point, like for instance, if you are having the reviews, let people sign. In the initial meeting where you are putting the PIP, let people sign on it so that the acknowledgement that this is what is happening can continue to be there without fear of any kind of disgruntlement where I say, no, I was coerced into it. We need to be able to keep our documents and keep our documents very well. Josephine, if you could just go into the next slide before I take some questions. Like I said, breaking the news, it's not easy. I just want to come out on this one a little bit more. I know I've talked about it in the steps of the checklist, but it is very important. Where you are telling this employee this from is very important. Don't put them in a space where every other person can hear your conversation. Get a place where there is privacy. Like I said, be very clear, be very direct, and most of all, show compassion for this individual. Because at the end of the day, this is a human being. Compassion is very important. Be very clear that it is you that is making the statements of concern. Don't go there and say, the business thinks, because this person would wonder, as my supervisor, what do you think? Just come and say, I have observed. I am concerned. Use the I statements. I also said, please be very, very open-minded when you're listening, because you are going to be listening through the frame of thinking of your team member, not your frame of thinking, their frame of thinking, how they have viewed the situation. You need to be able to walk into their frame of thinking in an open space up until they can be able or become willing to adjust their frame of thinking so that they can get back to what is required of them. So don't sit in that place where you think, I have told you you need to do. It becomes more painful if it is forced than when it is a joint effort. Again, approach the conversation as a problem-solving one, not a disciplinary action. You're like, we have this problem. How can we be able to sort this problem? Not do this. After all, at the end of 30 days, you're going to go home. That's not what is required. What is required here is for you to approach it as a problem-solving situation, problem-solving tools. You can put some problem-solving tools in this particular situation. Like the 5 whys comes to become very important during a PIP. You ask, so why is this occurring? They tell you, because I'm very busy. Why are you very busy? Because I had this. Why were you? Well, and by the time you get to the 5th why, there is a good chance that you have crystallized what the issue really is. And you need to be aware of your bias. Do you know how biased you are? Because if you don't know, you won't know whether or not you are being objective to that individual. Bias is something that can make a conversation that would have otherwise been really good to become a very difficult conversation. Like, for instance, if you already dislike this person because they have been frustrating you, you need to be able to be aware of that bias. Even when it comes up during the conversation, it could come up and show up in spaces like you get very impatient with this person because you've been listening to this for the whole year and it's annoying. Know that bias. When it creeps up, you should be able to say, hey, this is not the time for me to continue to be angry and impatient with this person. You can put that aside. So beware of your own bias as you're having this conversation. I'll pick some questions, Justin, before we go into the next slide. Now, I see on the chat, what if the performance issue stems from the employer not giving the employee necessary support in terms of information and tools required to perform effectively? When consulted, the employer does not see his problem in regards to this issue. How do you handle it as HR? This is normally the problem of every HR person, because we tend to be able to have a view of both the employer and the employee, and sometimes that view cannot be shared. Now, this is where I said, One, the HR is not the maker of the process. It's actually the employee and their manager. You as HR, you only come in as a person that is giving mediation during that conversation. The other thing you need to remember is that before you put somebody into a PIP, there are some questions that you can start to ask the supervisor when they come to you and say, hey, I want to put Wandi on a PIP. It can be really simple. Is that so? Yes. Do they have their job description? They'll say, yes, yeah. So where in the job description are they unable to perform? Okay. Is this clearly put in their objectives for the year? When you're explaining the objectives, what happened there, and they'll be able to say, blah, this happened. Okay. So how is this problem visualizing at work every day? Where is it coming from? Could we have put any other intervention? Do you think maybe we could job shadow? Okay. Do you think maybe at this place it's a breakdown of communication? These are some of the questions that you need to have with your manager at the time you are identifying the issue and assessing the issue. You remember the checklist that we just talked about, where you identify and assess the issue. Because if you miss that step, like I said, you might find yourself in a PIP that is a non-PIP, where the issue is not that of the employee, but it is a systemic challenge that is occurring. That's why I keep saying once again, when you don't follow those 7 steps that I have given, 9 out of 10, that PIP is going to be off. So as the HR, I would advise you to go in that process. If you do not reach consensus at this particular point, you may want to escalate the issue to the senior leadership of the organization if you're a business partner, or maybe to the person running the organization, the CEO or the business owner, to just agree that, hey, I understand that we want to put this person on a PIP. I have these reservations, and this is the kind of exposure that the business would be in if we don't follow space XYZ. And then once everybody is aware, at least you're sitting in one space where you know that you have put in all the recommendations that are needed for them to reassess the situation before they decide how to proceed. Now, I see another question of, is it right to place all employees under PIP when the business as a whole is not performing? I would be very, very averse to that particular statement, because when you say the business is not performing, how does that mean? What does that mean for me as an employee? As an employee, if the business is not performing, what if I'm the tea person and my work is to deliver tea to all of the offices? If the business is not performing financially, what has that got to do with me? What I would advise is, before a business gets to that space where it says everybody is not performing, you need to have really assessed your systems, because here you seem to have a systemic problem. You need to go back and understand, why is everybody not performing? I would not say that it is not right to place everybody under PIP. It might be that you have a problem where everybody needs to be under a PIP, but I would be looking at it more on what is the challenge that the business is actually having. And I'll be very keen to make sure that each and every person that gets into a PIP is very clear on how their performance is lacking, which goals have been set to ensure that their performance improves, and specifically which actions they should take to make sure that their performance improves. This goes back into what I had said earlier in terms of the structure of the PIP. I see another question, is PIP and PDP the same? No, it's not. A performance development plan is very centered towards the way a person wants to develop themselves going forward. Like, you can notice some people after a performance evaluation, they would say, I would like this training to improve this particular skill or to gain this particular situation. That's a PDP. A PIP is actually centered on when things have gone completely wrong. A PDP is more progressive as you're moving forward and you're strengthening the talent that is within your organization. An employee refused to be put on PIP and it's seeking to sue the company for constructive dismissal. Can an employee refuse to be put on a PIP? Sometimes they do, especially when you're in situations where you're heavy on unions. they could be able to actually negotiate and refuse to be put on the PIP. The thing about suing in the middle of unemployment, I would tell you the courts have been very clear about that. They normally rarely interfere within the management processes of the organization. This is mainly because the understanding is you will not be suffering any harm by following the processes of the organization, and it will not have taken away your right to go and sue for constructive dismissal if the processes of the organization have not worked. However, that is things that we say on the outside, but it's a really difficult space when you find yourself in a spot where you're with an employee and they have refused to be put on a PIP. I would go back to how you're communicating with this person. Are you being compassionate? Are you hearing them out? Are there chances and possibilities that there could be a fundamental problem with the PIP that you want to put that person in? I would want to ask you to go back, look internally, and see if there is a way congruence can be achieved for you and your team member. Could you kindly repeat on what point do you put an employee on PIP? Like we said, if other interventions that exist in terms of clarification of performance, ensuring that job shadowing, job rotation, performance coaching and counseling has not worked, then you can start considering to put somebody on a PIP. I'll take the last question before I go back to our slides. An employee has an autistic chills. She's moved from town A to town B. Town B has no facilities to take care of this child, and she's not able to move with him, and her performance drops. She requests for a transfer back or to a town with facilities that the request is denied. She is finally let go through PIP and performance meeting. Does she have a case? Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to be very clear about the purposes of, for instance, conversations with Wandi. When you look at where we are coming from, we keep insisting that we have to create employment for people where they can enjoy full, productive, happy employment for everybody involved. From where I sit, when you move an employee that actually cannot be able to humanly be able to deliver on XYZ, you then cannot go back and say your performance is bad when you have been able to disable that particular employee. Please notice that I do not mean that to take away the right of the employer to transfer employees to places where the need of the business is at. I am not taking that away, and there is no courts that actually take that away. But when in full knowledge of the employer, you pick an employee and take them to a place where they are incapacitated to be able to perform, then put them through a PIP, and then have a performance disciplinary meeting and dismiss them, this person could have a case to say that they were in actual fact constructively dismissed. But I always advise the employers that follow us to try as much as possible and give people a good employment. Be compassionate, be human with them, and let's see how we can progress better when everybody is talking from a place of understanding and compassion and good empathy. Thank you very much for that question, and let's go back to our slides. Just in our slides. Good. Now, just to recap, we have come through and talked about what a PIP is, and we've been able to explain the structure, the things that are required, that it needs to come after an appraisal, and it needs to be a result after other measures have failed. We have gone in and considered the things that could make you start thinking about a PIP. We talked about the behavioral challenges, communication issues, skills gap, among the others. We've gone in and talked about how the checklist of the PIP, well, we said, identify, assess the issue, jointly devise a solution and document. We've talked about how you can be able to approach the employee in a good space, have an open mind, beware of your biases, speak with the eye, and make sure that you've been able to get a place where you are moving together rather than you are requiring and the employee is complying because you don't have any other choice. Now, what are the benefits of a PIP? again, you notice that when you don't take a PIP as a disciplinary tool, you notice that it can have really good benefits. Like one, you can in actual fact improve the employee's performance. But if you come at a PIP, or you come to a decision to put somebody on a PIP because you want to dismiss them in the next 30 days, and you just want to follow the process and say, yeah, you see, they didn't work in the PIP, so I give them no chocos, etc. You're not in actual fact improving your performance, because that's not what you're putting the processes of the PIP to be, which can be really sad, because there's quite a number of benefits when you in actual fact improve an employee's performance. Like I said, a PIP can really be a good point to clarify expectations, because during the PIP, if you've had a value conversation, if you have jointly devised a plan on how to correct the performance challenges, you will 9 out of 10 have an employee who is very clear on what is needed, and you will be very clear that the employee understands exactly what is needed. And every performance management expert in here knows that that is the sweet spot of performance. When everybody knows what is needed, and when everybody can rely on the fact that the knowledge will be used properly towards the achievement of the goals of the organization. When I'm in such a space, I am happier. Of course, that's when I mean your job satisfaction is higher. And of course, when I'm very satisfied, there is a chance or not that I will not be leaving the organization, hence reducing the turnover. And also, when you do a PIP, like the question that was asked here on the chat box, a very good question where they said, what if there is lack of support? What if it is information and tools that are missing? This PIP process can be used to identify those things and to actually put proper business processes into play to make sure that these things do not become a problem for the next job holder. Then again, like I said, it helps to improve, to have a common understanding of performance, because the thing about performance is that sometimes I just think my objectives are out of the blues and they don't connect with anything. But when I get the bigger picture, I'm able to understand and appreciate why that shared understanding of what performance is very important. I normally use the example of a Hawaiian pizza. If I am the person that dices the pineapples in a town elsewhere, and the person that makes the dough is in another town, and the person that has the cheese is in another town, and the person that has the ham is in another town. So they then send their things to this person who puts them on a shelf in another place. Then a chef comes in and cooks them, and then another one comes out and cuts them, and then another one comes out and serves it. You know, that person sitting in that town dicing the pineapple has no idea how important their job is. All they know is, let me cut this thing. They don't know why it's supposed to be in the square. They don't even understand, is it a good pineapple? Should I put this one? Should I change it? But imagine if you come back and tell this person, hey, we are making a Hawaiian pizza, and your pineapple is the centerpiece of the pizza. You will see a very different understanding, because they know exactly what the common goal is. So if you could always try and make sure that every person in the Hawaiian pizza knows that it's a Hawaiian pizza that is being made, you're going to have an easier understanding of performance than when I know all I do at work is chop pineapples. Then again, it enhances communication. If we've had a good conversation during the period of which I have been giving we have been jointly devising a plan to improve my performance. I've talked with my manager. I've been vulnerable with them. They have been vulnerable with me. We've gone back. We've organized things, and we've gotten to that space where, you know, I believe that you mean the best for me, and I'm obligated to be able to also deliver the best for you. That enhanced communication starts to build trust and collaboration for the business, which is really important for you to be able to achieve the goals that you need to achieve. Now, Justin, let's take it to the next slide. Now, this is where rubber meets the road. When the outcome is negative, When all those things I have said, you put everything into play, and at the end of the 90-day period, Wandi shows absolutely no improvement, nothing whatsoever, and then we would have to say, okay, Wandi, we have really tried. Now we need to just, go our different ways. Ladies and gentlemen, the key thing to recognize here is that even with all the performance review notes, the documentation that are there, and also the setting of these meetings, etc., that is not a disciplinary process. If you use that to then at the end of the PIP give somebody a letter of termination, you will still be found to have unfairly terminated that individual, and that individual will be would be given an award for unfair termination. I want to underscore and reiterate, especially for the people that have missed sessions where we've talked about termination. Once the process is complete, say after 90 days, and I want to now dismiss Wandi, I have to go and issue a show cause notice and say, show cause why we should not take disciplinary action on you owing to poor performance. In the show cause, you can say, we've also noted that you are put on this program to help you improve your performance, which resulted to the negative space of you are not being able to recruit the performance. Please show cause why disciplinary action should not be taken against you according to whatever placed in our manual, etc., etc. Then that person has to respond to the show cause. You have to go through the show cause and understand the response to the show cause and understand that person. Sometimes you could find this person was brought to HR after the PIP and the show cause. And when they explain to you, they say, my manager was never there after the PIP. I never knew that this is what I'm supposed to do. This manager gave me this document and disappeared. Sometimes that could be a place where you can say, okay, instead of us proceeding into the disciplinary, why don't we go back and extend the period of the PIP? However, sometimes the employee could respond and you find the response is insufficient. This is the point where you invite them for a disciplinary hearing. Make sure that the disciplinary hearing is well constituted when it comes to the panel. Make sure that the discussions are very robust. Make sure that you remind this person of their rights to be accompanied during the disciplinary hearing. And make sure that after the completion of the disciplinary hearing, you have taken minutes and every party within that conversation has signed the minutes, and then issue the decision of a panel so that you write to this person and say, it is the decision of the panel that you be terminated from employment owing to this particular area in our manual and in the law. You have 7 days to appeal this process. It's a say. If the person decides to appeal, allow them to appeal. The right to appeal is very important, and it needs to be shown that this person was aware that there was a right given to them to appeal the decision that was given. Quite a number of cases when it comes to matters termination of employment, which is another conversation altogether, have actually been ruled to be unfair because they did not offer the right to appeal, or the person within the disciplinary panel was completely unaware of the fact that they had that right to appeal. Now, once this person has left, the organization back, there are some questions you need to ask yourself. What was the learning that we had in this situation? For the next person that is coming into this role, how can we be able to check and make sure that, one, we are recruiting the person that will survive and thrive in this environment, that will also be able to deliver that which we need in terms of the performance that we now understand and have defined better. Do not just end the PIP without any learning, because that doesn't help you as an employer, and it doesn't help you with the employees that you have now and the ones that you would have in the future. So make sure that during and after a PIP, the organization is learning too. Justin, I'll go to the last slide before we take questions. Now, let's talk about some of the cases that have been decided on matters relating to PIP. Please note there are quite a number of cases that have an element of the performance improvement plan in them. You could always visit www.kenyalaw.org to be able to find quite a number of cases that are available within the Employment and Labor Relations Court. So the beauty about that website is that you can get any case that you are looking for as long as you know the name or the case number. Now, I want to just zero in on 3 cases. I love these 3 cases because they are very specific when it comes to matters PIP. The case Kenya Science Research International Technical and Allied Workers Union versus Stanley Kinyanjui and Magnet Ventures of 2010 ruled very clearly that the PIP is not a disciplinary tool. And they were very clear and said the proper procedure, once poor performance of an employee is noted, is to point out the shortcomings to the employee and give the employee an opportunity to improve over a reasonable period of time. In our view, 2 to 3 months will be reasonable. So you see, they gave such good direction on how to put a PIP. You remember all of the things that I was talking about as the ingredients of the PIP, the specificity of it, the timelines, and the clarity of it all have been noted in this case. But also this case has been quoted in several other cases that they have clearly stated the PIP is not in itself a disciplinary tool. In the case of Jen Samba Mukula versus Oltukalai Lodge of 2010, again, the PIP must be presided by an appraisal. I just like that. And the courts were really clear, as in they stated it in that way. You can't just wake up in the morning and put somebody on a PIP. You must have had an appraisal period. There has to be an understanding that has been had on what the performance is and what the challenge is before you put them on a PIP. And in the case of Evelyn Lynn Kagendo versus Startpack Industries Limited, the PIP proceedings are not disciplinary proceedings, thus cannot substitute a disciplinary process. I need to let you know, ladies and gentlemen, that this is the meat of the PIP. Very many people believe that once you have put somebody on a PIP and discharged them out of a negative outcome, you can simply issue them with a termination letter. You will do all that, this person will sue, and they will actually have a very strong case to be able to get compensated for unfair termination. Because remember, poor performance is one of the reasons that somebody can be terminated. But for a termination to be fair, it is considered to be of a valid reason, not one that is considered as exclusion, that followed the right process, that the process had due regard to the processes of equity and natural justice. When those 4 conditions are not fulfilled, that particular dismissal becomes unfair as per the law is concerned. So ladies and gentlemen, these are nice 3 cases. You can actually go, once we share with you this presentation, you can open them and read through them. And the beauty about reading through these cases is that you find that even inside of the cases, there is other citations that can be very important for you to just keep seeing what the courts are saying in different types of places when it comes to the PIP. Ladies and gentlemen, let me pick some questions as we are winding up. Do you hold the disciplinary process while still giving the employee a chance to improve their performance, or do you conduct the disciplinary process when the failed PIP in mind? Now, first things first, a PIP should not be approached as a disciplinary action. When you do that, you miss the benefits of a PIP. You miss the value that taking an employee through a PIP means for their business, because there'll be no learning, there'll be no understanding. You're just moving towards one direction. Now, when you are doing a PIP and put somebody through a disciplinary process, that's constructive dismissal in its own, because the lack of sincerity in your process can be seen very clearly when you have told somebody, I'm giving you time to improve, but I'm also disciplining you while you're trying to improve. That's what it actually means. So a PIP cannot run concurrently with a disciplinary process. And then the PIP, once it is concluded, like you've rightly said, and it comes with the person did not improve and there was not improvement noted as per the process, then you can start the process of disciplinary. Is the employee entitled to a copy of the minutes thereafter? Yes. Every person must have the copy of their minutes. If you don't have the copy of your minutes, I could easily say that I didn't have access to them in the first instance. Give employee their copy, give the employer their file copy. So always give the minutes for any of the processes, including the meetings for the PIP. You give somebody the PIP, they sign it, copy one theirs, copy one for the file. During the review meetings, copy one for them, copy one for the file. During the disciplinary process, every documentation process needs to be in duplicate, yours and mine. What website did you say I could get the case law again? I missed that. That is www.kenyalaw.org. Josephine, if you could assist me by just typing that on the chat box, that is www.kenyalaw.org. I'll repeat it one more time for posterity, www.kenyalaw.org, and you will be able to find that there. Thank you very much, Josephine, for that. I also see two questions here as we are winding up. What happens if an employee falls sick during the period and is given 15 days of sick off? They should be discounted from the performance improvement period, because if the employee is not available to attend work for reasons that are recognized by law, then the period needs to be extended so that they can be able to come into the organization and be able to improve their performance as required. What is the standard PIP period? How many times can a PIP be extended? Like I had said earlier, there's no pronouncement on this is how long a PIP should be. The only case that I have actually seen that has said something about how long the PIP should be, again, is the one for Kenya Science Research International Technical and Allied Workers Union versus Stanley Kinyanjui and Magnet Ventures. That one said they would think 2 or 3 months would be reasonable for somebody to be given an opportunity to improve. However, there are quite a number of cases where people have been on PIP for 1 year, for 1 year and a half, depending on the complexity of the issue. What I would advise leaders and people within HR and other managers is to make sure that you are understanding and approaching the PIP with the need to be able to actually improve performance. And you also look at the complexity of the issue, then you decide whether or not you can be able to put that person in a 30-day or a 90-day. Or 1 year, depending on the circumstances within that space, it can be extended. Like for instance, in that instance where one of the questions has been asked, when somebody falls sick, you can extend it. Or when during the improvement period, some of the actions that are required needed to be extended. Like for instance, if I was put on a PIP because I lacked sales target, I've been consistently missing my sales target, and then we see that the business actually required, like during COVID, and then that period stopped right there. Now, it's not fair to say that you're expecting me to get that sales target during COVID. So that place can actually pause and be unpaused again. So it can be extended. There is no specific time that has been put for extension or the specific time that the PIP should be. But what I'm seeing as best practice is that it goes in 30, 60, 90-day periods. And I've also seen, especially those PIPs for very senior employees, they can go into 1 year. What I would advise you is to make sure that you understand what is reasonable and what is unreasonable. I wouldn't think that it would be reasonable to put the T-girl on a PIP for 1 year. You get? So just sit back and ask yourself, is this a reasonable time to put this person in this situation? And the last question would be, can a PIP be an outcome of a disciplinary process? I missed that. Yes, a PIP can be an outcome of a disciplinary process. So let's say I have been consistently failing to close the accounts, and therefore I'm posting in the general ledger wrong things. Then we come and I'm in the disciplinary process, and maybe the person that is the shock is more on you're being negligent in your work. Then we go into the process of the disciplinary, I explain myself, and we notice actually here there is an opportunity to improve. So we will put you on a PIP for the next 3 months to make sure that we give you this opportunity to improve, because we realize that you're not really negligent in your duties, but it's just that maybe there is 1 or 2 things that can be tweaked for you to be able to now get into that space and perform properly. So yes, the PIP can be an outcome of a disciplinary process. Josephine, I don't know if I have any other questions. Great. I
believe, let's see. Yeah, there's just one more from Catherine Gitamo, and I think after that we can close.
Alrighty. Should the PIP be given during the performance period, e.g. Q2 or after? A PIP can be given at any particular time. The thing that we just encourage you to always do is give it after a performance appraisal. Once you've completed a performance appraisal, you can put somebody in a PIP. Or once you've completed a performance monitoring place, you can put somebody on a PIP. So it can run concurrently with your performance period. So don't worry about should it be in Q1, Q2. It can be in any period. It's just that it needs to follow the processes that we have discussed. Just take PIP and outcome of disciplinary. A lovely point there, easy to miss. Thank you very much for that. And ladies and gentlemen, we have 5 minutes to half of the hour. I just want to say that you have been a very lovely audience. I've loved the interactions, the questions, and I would just like to let you know that we shall be sharing this, the webinar. I forget the PowerPoint presentations, excuse me. And we will also be giving you guys a lovely PIP template that you can be able to use. And you could also visit www.conversationswith1d.org, where there is an actual toolkit that can help you to go through a performance improvement plan from when you set them, how to set them, and how to proceed with them. I have absolutely enjoyed this conversation, and I'm looking forward to seeing you next month, same time, same place. Back to you, Josephine.
Thank you very much, Wendy. That was a great conversation, quite a learning process for all of us who have been participating. Thank you, everybody, for your enthusiasm, for your patronage. Thank you for always being there to converse this with us. We want you to know that your contribution and your presence here is every day enhancing the HR narrative. And as we all hope to, make the employment space a better one for all of us. Asanteni sana. We want to wish you a lovely weekend. Be safe out there. Until next time, remember to keep it Conversations with Wendy.